Tara Brown and the Swinging London Colour Revolution by Vic Janum, Chapter 7, Part 2. By June, Nikki started showing. Very little at first, but a skinny chick like her had equally little to hide. Some of the girls in our crowd noticed first. They verified their suspicions with Nikki, and then the rumor could be spread. Soon, everybody knew the young couple were pregnant, and many seemed to think it funny. I told Nikki not to worry. We'd be dancing until she felt she shouldn't any longer, and then we would make ourselves a pretty nest at home. Slightly more problematic became our summer trip to Lugala. Mummy dear was not too happy seeing her little boy's girlfriend expecting, and behaved improperly rude, calling Nikki an impostor who was in it for the money. After she had had her fill, she abruptly decided we should get married to legitimize our child. Stunned by her future mother-in-law's attitude, Nikki was nevertheless satisfied with the outcome of our uncharacteristically short visit. "When I am Mrs. Brown, she can't get at me any longer," she said in the peace of our bedroom. "I wouldn't be too sure of that," I reacted. "What do you mean?" Nikki asked with a lot of silence. I knew I should have shut up. "You know, my mother can be vengeful," I said clumsily. "But don't worry, we won't be bothered by her at home." Nikki was only half assured. "I love you, Tara Brown, but I don't think I can ever love your mother." "You don't have to, but I will have to see her every now and then. She needs me." "And you need her." "Not since I have you." "Ha! That's what all men say." With Nikki's belly growing bigger and bigger and nightlife becoming increasingly difficult for her, my attitude towards approaching fatherhood wasn't really evolving. The thought of carrying responsibility for such a tiny, vulnerable creature still scared me stiff. Yet until the very last instance it seemed a theoretical problem. When Nikki was letting me feel the baby's feet kicking her from the inside, as long as it was in the womb, it wasn't really there for me. In a way, on the 12th of November, I was the same person as I had been when Nikki first voiced a suspicion about her situation. Even at this late stage, I couldn't in the least imagine what fatherhood might be like. Next day, I knew. He was a lovely little creature, very much like his mother, and somewhat underweight, according to the midwife. She was an old-fashioned delivery expert that Mummy dear had sent our way, and she barely kept herself from scolding our unfit age and lifestyle. I thought our baby was just fine with two skinny parents to take after. "Isn't he beautiful?" I said to poor Nikki, who lay devastated by her delivery. I told her I wanted to call him Dorian. I like the name, and he's an Irish boy, born into a modern family. He deserves to be called after one of our great writers, or in this case, one of the great characters they created. You know, Dorian Gray, the young man who stopped getting older after he had his portrait painted. Because the painting took the beatings for his misdeeds and got old? That book. Nicky was reluctant. It's a beautiful name, sure, but the Dorian of the novel is not a beautiful character. He even gets away with murder, thanks to his innocent looks. Better not tell too many people where we got it from. Being with Nicky for almost 2 years now had shielded me from a number of faux pas. Perhaps she was onto something again. It was true. I had read the book not so long ago and felt sorry for poor Dorian, who messed up his life because he couldn't manage the commotion his beauty caused. Yet he was handsome and he was smart. He was interesting enough. "Do you think Dorian's bad character will affect your baby?" I asked. "Of course I do." "Then what do you suggest?" Nicky, having won the argument, sank back in exhaustion. "Dorian is fine," she said. I like it, but don't mention the other one too often, please. I promised. It seemed unfit to quarrel in the presence of a newborn. Anyway, who cared about the origin of a name? I'd wasted enough time myself explaining how self-evident it was for an Irishman to be called Tara. Nevertheless, I would tell sometimes, but not immediately, and it never came to be a big thing. He was Dorian, as in Dorian Gray. Yes, I liked the name. To be honest, it was easy enough to appear superficial in our little world where everybody was about clothes, bikes, and music. It was part of my act as well. If I wanted to be at the center of things, the kid that London swung around, I should be in upswing mood at all times and not bother anybody with deeper thoughts, apart from my wife. Little Dorian was a handful those first weeks, and we were glad Christmas was approaching so we could move to Lugala for a few weeks and share the burdens of parenthood with all the people there. You know, it's time we got ourselves some help, Nicky said. It's been just the three of us long enough, and we could do with better lodgings as well. Which is why we are here, I answered. My mother can scream all she wants to, but she is not going to let her grandchild suffer. You will see. I was right, of course. Over the holidays, we managed to secure the help of Mary, a young girl from County Wicklow, who had shown interest in coming to London and moving in with us. The family trust also agreed to put me on a higher allowance so we could pay for the nice little place I had found us in Belgravia, in one of the mews not too far from my father's flat. A mews is a back alley with small houses, often stables where horses and carriages were kept with staff quarters on the landing. Now that everyone was driving cars, many of the houses in these mews had been turned into apartments to let. They offered affordable housing in a quiet street in the inner city and have always been very much sought after. Back in town, I got myself busy collecting furniture, including a cot and a giant television set. For a couple of days, I watched how Mary handled our boy and stuck out a hand myself sometimes. Then I could no longer suppress the urge to go out again. So I left the baby with the girls and went back to my scene, which I had done without for the most of 2 months. Dear friends would be happy for me, and what others thought couldn't touch me at that moment. The influence of little Dorian, I guess. It was still expected of young fathers to be out of the way and only get in on the act once the tiny thing started talking, and then some. While happily pretending to be a modern guy most of the times, I didn't mind at all the old-fashioned solution in this particular case. Fatherhood was fun, as long as you could run away from your baby. Let the girls have the handle. Playing with Dorian whenever I was home and awake, which wasn't very often, I started spending more of my time on cars, considering seriously to go into racing. I knew all about driving dangerously. In fact, I was quite good at it, and my accidents had mostly been unfortunate. Now that I was a father, I might care a bit more about other people's experiences when approaching me, and project my need for speed on secured racetracks. And you know what? I might actually be good at it. I'd always been good at the wheel. You know that by now. It was time to measure my skills with other fine drivers, see where I belonged in the hierarchy. I thought, if I gave myself 5 years to become world champion, Dorian would have the age to remember it. That would be nice. Another reason to have something to do was that almost everybody else had something to do by now. Bands we'd heard of for a while were having their breakthroughs. New shops were opening in the neighborhood. Photography became popular, especially the gritty black and white of our favorite bands and models. A new year was loudly beckoning, and I understood my role was also up for further professionalization. The days of simply joy were over. We had sent that first message, dress up and play the part, and young people were beginning to pick up on the idea that it was a cool way to spend a Saturday night. I had been spreading the idea of many more shops, as the demand was clearly there, and had even for a while adopted the Picasso quote that it was okay to steal as long as your product was better than the original. Teenagers like our clothes, I often said, but they don't have the money, so they need a cheaper alternative. I was passing on the message and had been egging the year on until Dorian was born, and I had seen myself forced to take a back seat, see how people were making it to year's end. I was still quite young and not always taken for fool in those early days when London had only just begun swinging in certain locales. I wasn't mixing with the Beatles or any other happening band yet. I was playing my role in anonymity while polishing my image as a bright young partygoer. This in allusion to my dear mother Una, who in her golden years had been one of the bright young people, or things, as the press liked to call them, and who used to roam the bars of London 30 years before us. Another change in the air was the position of us noble boys and girls. We'd always been where the fun was. When we started out enjoying London nightlife, things still felt like an exclusive hobby to us. This was where you met your pals, other fortunate ones, who you'd been around for most of your fun youth. When you are born rich and your only cares in this world are your own obsessions, as I have said before, being happy and energetic almost feels like an obligation. How could one not love life if one has everything at their favor? Well, it is possible, of course. I've known scores of rich kids who were terribly unhappy because they could not cope with either the embarrassment of their riches or their parents' exigencies. Noblesse oblige. I had it easy, as I was living with my mother, who had been a bad girl herself and who remembered those days well. In fact, she only demanded we were happy. Well, I was, by nature, and it was this happiness, my energy, my joie de vivre, I brought with me wherever I appeared. I know it can be overwhelming sometimes to meet a happy rich person. People may easily think, isn't being rich or happy bad enough? Must they really come together? The trick is to never show any presumption. Never assume other people can't be as happy as you, even if you know they can't. While my friends and I had grown up in a time when enjoying life was still very much considered an upper class thing, we understood immediately that the 1960s were going to be different, that our decade was to be an era of social integration, of classes mixing and blurring, a time when talent and will would be of more importance than money and titles. With all these smart people popping up who really were creating something new, being a check payer suddenly wasn't good enough anymore. If you did not want to be seen as a relic from previous times, you might as well pretend having your own extraordinary engagement. The times, they were changing, as Bob Dylan sang at the start of the year. For me, it meant creating a new reason for my presence in the center of things, and it involved becoming less elitist in my thinking. I was the son of a lord and would always remain so, but I wasn't in any capacity going to presume of that. Being moneyed was just another commodity tradable for a place at the best table. More importantly, I was Tara, from midnight duo Nicky and Tara, always there where the action was. And now I was also going to be known as a fierce car racer. I discussed my plans one evening with my good friend Glenn, who was equally addicted to driving fast. With him, I had met Jim Clark, the new Formula One champion, though he hadn't achieved that feat yet when we met. It was at one of the off calendar F1 races that didn't count for the Cup, many of whom were held in Britain, where we shook hands. A Scottish farmer's son from the borderlands between the Hadrian Wall and the Scottish frontier, he completely lacked the pomp and self-importance that characterized the average race car driver. Racing being expensive and sponsoring not much developed yet, drivers in their vast majority were wealthy people who approached their sport with a mix of contempt for life and a sense of duty to contribute to technical progress, as much as they were physically able to do so. They were like jockeys in their approach, everything for the win, leading to short, exciting careers. By 1963, cars had become somewhat safer with the introduction of lighter and lower models, where the driver would no longer sit on top of a guided missile, but inside a car, that also showed much better corner performance. Jim Clark was picked up by Colin Chapman, who ran the Lotus team and was wanting to give him a good car. Clark did not disappoint. That year, he won 7 out of 10 of the points races. That is quite ridiculous in a sport where 30% of cars are forced to retire prematurely every race. I like Jim Clark. I know I belong myself to the old guard of money elite sportsmen. I'm not a professional athlete, yet I'm also a country boy. I love the big city, but I was born and raised on a mountain top, at similar distance to the center of things. I recognized his vibe from home and felt comfortable immediately. On the night he won the title, I was celebrating wildly. Glenn said I should try lower levels first, races where one can bring their own car. I was thinking of owning a team, I countered. You know, Terra Racing. Are you crazy? Glenn shot. That's way too expensive, even for you. It's all about corporate money now. But you can probably afford the lower leagues and see if somebody likes your style. I didn't like being ripped off of my dream so fast. My mother spent an awful lot on that no-good husband of hers, I sulked. Glenn laughed. But you don't have access to that money yet. You told me so yourself. Quiet.